Welcome to the Unabridged podcast. I'm Ashley.
And this is Jen.
Join us for bookish episodes and check out our website, unabridgedpod.com, where you can find lots of new bookish content to grow your TBR.
Sign up for our newsletter to find out more about online book discussions and upcoming events. Find us on Patreon for extra unabridged content. Join us on Instagram and Facebook at unabridgedpod and message us there or see our website to get plugged into the Unabridged community. You want opinions about books? We've got them.
Hello and welcome to Unabridged. This is a very special episode. It is our episode 300.
Woo!
Woo! And today, to celebrate our 300th episode, we have a very special guest. Before I introduce our guest, I'm going to let our guest say hello. Hello!
Yay!
Longtime listeners will know that voice. We are so happy to have our beloved friend and co-host Sara back on the podcast today.
Yay!
I'm so happy to be back. So longtime listeners know Sara did the podcast with all three of us for years and years. And so we asked her if she wanted to come and join us today to celebrate. To celebrate today, we'll do, like normal, our Bookish Check-In, but then we wanted to go back and revisit some of the highlights over the years in the podcast. And so we wanted to share with you all some of our favorite books that came up when we were thinking back, and then also some special things that we've done together. To get started, we will start the way we always do with our Bookish Check-In. Sara, what are you reading?
So some listeners might not know that I'm back in the classroom. So I'm teaching 7th grade English. So I read a lot and pretty broadly. So I'm going to give you the one that I'm reading outside the classroom and one that I'm reading in my classroom. So since it's fall, I'm reading Riley Sager's The Only One Left, which is a spooky story about a woman who is not able to talk. She's older and she has a caregiver, and it's set in the 80s. So when she was a young girl, she was accused of killing her whole family, but nobody could ever prove it. So all of this is kind of playing out in the book. And it's so far, it's really good. I typically like Riley Sager for a good thriller or spooky story. And then for the classroom, I'm reading Linda Mullally Hunt's One for the Murphys. She also wrote Fish in a Tree, which is a beloved book. But this one is about Carly, whose mother has just been a victim of domestic violence. She's in the hospital in intensive care, and they have to place her in foster care with the Murphys. And so far, it is fabulous. I love it. And if you have a middle school age child, I think that it grabs you right from the beginning. So that's what I'm reading in my two different lives.
I love that, Sara. I had not heard of, and in fact, I don't think I've read Hunt's other one either. So I really need to check out her work. And then I don't remember if I told you, but I finally read Riley Sager's Survive the Night. And I loved it. I thought it was very compelling and very twisty. I was very surprised by a lot of the turns, but it was funny because I was reading it at night, and I don't think, it's not super scary or anything, but it was definitely impacting my sleep, and I had to be like, oh, can I read this at night?
Well, that one I think is it's almost claustrophobic because she doesn't have a phone, because we're so used to being able to contact people whenever we need to contact. And then it being set in the 80s, you just think, just pull out the phone, but you don't have a phone, you have to find a pay phone.
Well, there are a lot of times where you're like, please make a different choice.
Yes, yes.
She keeps not making that choice. And I'm like, oh no. So yes, there's an intensity to it that I enjoyed for spooky season, but I also had to be like, oh, this is not soothing for going to bed, so.
Yeah, I love The Only One Left. I'm hit or miss on his. I read them every summer. I didn't love this last one. The name is escaping me right now, but I love The Only One Left. And I have read Fish in a Tree, and that was great. I haven't read One for the Murphys, though.
It's really, gosh, Jen, you would be able to read it in one sitting because it's a short book, but it's really good.
I love that. What about you, Jen? What are you reading?
So I'm reading James Islington's The Will of the Many, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I will say this one has pretty high fantasy, and so there is a lot of complicated world building. So I will spare you all of the details, but the things that you would need to know are that the main character is a teenager named Viz. He's 17, and he lives in a society that is very hierarchical, and basically what happens is the people in the lower tiers cede, C-E-D-E, there was some confusion there, their will, so their energy and emotional energy as well, to the people in the upper hierarchies through this process that we don't really know much about yet.
Like on purpose?
On purpose. But they don't really have a choice. It's just built into the legal system. And if they commit a crime, their punishment is built around them being attached to these things called sappers that pull even more of their will and send it up the hierarchy. And Viz's family, we don't know exactly what happened, but in some way they were killed by this government. And so Viz has decided that he never wants to cede. So there are opportunities when you're younger to cede, to like garner favor and to do these other things. And he has never taken advantage of any of that because he sees it as surrendering to the government that killed his parents. But as he gets closer and closer to 18, that's the point at which it becomes involuntary. And just as he's, feeling like the end is near and that he's going to have to start, because it makes them tired and it makes them, they lose their will. So they just can't do the things that they want to do. It's all subsumed by these other people. This strange opportunity pops up. And I don't want to give too much away, but there's a dark academia element. So there's this training part that I'm in the midst of now to get him ready to go to this academy. And then there are all kinds of, like sabotage, and there are all these different groups. It's pretty complicated, but it's really compelling. I don't know Islington, but he's pretty well known in fantasy circles. He's an Australian author, but the book feels very Roman. There are a lot of like Roman names, and so kind of those allusions. So yeah, so far it's really compelling. I'm enjoying it. It is a chunker. It's like 650 pages. So we'll see how that goes.
Immediately out.
I know. I was like, oh man, that is a long book.
It is a long book. It is a duology, so there's only going to be one more. But yeah, so that is James Islington's The Will of the Many.
Wow. That sounds really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely sounds interesting. It's just, me and the pages can't do those.
Me and the pages is very quotable.
Same, Brett. In fact, I started V. Schwab's Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. Have either of you read that?
No, not yet.
I started on my Kindle, and I just didn't realize, but that thing, I don't know the page count, but it is long. It is very long. So I've been reading and reading. And I'm like, oh, this is like so compelling. For some reason, I saw how far I was in it, and it's like 25%.
It is chunky. It is a chunky one. I don't know the page count either, but yeah.
It's a long book. It's a long book. Oh, it's only 515 pages.
Oh, that's not bad.
Well, the hardcover is 544.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, so 650. That's a good indicator for me that, it's long. Okay.
All right, Ashley, what are you reading?
Well, aside from Schwab's book that I kind of paused on because I was like, oh, I got to wait to get. I got to pace myself. I'm also reading Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, How We Meet and Why It Matters. We were actually going to interview her on a show that I work with. So I was really interested to read what she had to say. And Sara, I think you especially would love this book. Jen, I don't know how familiar you are with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So a few things. One, when we'd say gathering, Parker is really talking about, so this is a nonfiction book that really examines how we get together and how we could do it more effectively, is basically what the book is about. And when she's talking about gathering, she really means like meetings, clubs, wedding showers, weddings, but also like she works with these huge, very high stakes events that are, like with UN and with two conflicting sides and peace situations trying to find ways forward. Like she does that kind of work also. That's like very much like what I would consider the mediation space. But she's just really an expert at breaking down how we get together and how if we did it with more intentionality, then we could have very different outcomes. And it's fascinating. Like I really have just been like, wow, I get together with people all the time. We all do. And I think she just talks about how if we would stop looking so much at what's on the menu and what kind of chair we're going to pick, and instead would think about how we invite people into the space and what we do to set up the moment before it begins, and then how to make that moment the most impactful, it would be totally transformative for us. And I think she makes a really convincing case for it with a lot of really interesting examples. So I was just really, I hadn't heard a lot about it. I mean, it has gotten a lot of coverage. I hadn't heard a lot about what it really got into. And I just have really been, I mean, I was listening to it on audio first and I was enjoying it so much that I was like, oh, I'm going to buy the book as well because I really want it in print, because I think there's just a lot of things that I would like to carry with me about the next time I'm setting up anything or participating in something where we're doing a community event. I just think she has a lot of very practical tips. So I have a ways to go and I'm still like, it's unfurling. But I think what is a takeaway for me so far is just that it is worth taking some time to think about something that I definitely haven't thought much about. And by thinking about it, it really can result in some meaningful interactions and just kind of change the way we do things. I mean, she very much is like, for example, with the book club, if the book club is about discussing the book, then like you don't actually have a purpose. When you have a gathering, the purpose has to be debatable. The way she talks about gatherings is a lot how we would talk about like teaching people how to write a persuasive essay. It's the same kind of stuff of like, if you're just stating the topic, then you have not yet identified the purpose of your meeting, for example. And so I think just really, she's like, we often just do things because it's the way we've always done them. And I mean, of course, all of us have lots of experience with meetings and thinking about how we can do meetings more effectively. So I think what I really love about it so far is just that it's really seeing all the different landscapes where we have gatherings and the way that it's applicable. So I think what I like about it is that it's both something that I have not thought about in this way, and then also that no matter what your life circumstances are, it can be applicable because we all, as humans, get together with other humans. And so it's like, how do we do that in interesting ways? So again, that's Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, How We Meet and Why It Matters. And I'm really intrigued so far.
That sounds awesome.
I think you'd really like it.
That sounds like one I'm going to put on my audio list. So.
Yes, I love the audio.
Yeah, I listened as well. And it did make me want to buy the print because I think it's so applicable to the classroom as well. And I keep thinking I want to buy it to think about ways I can apply those lessons to the classroom. Because I think so often, like I have an agenda, but I'm not necessarily thinking about, how am I inviting my students into the space and how am I making clear the purpose for why we're meeting? And I really enjoyed it.
And even like in literary circles and stuff, like I think when you're teaching kids how to have like small groups, like I think there's a lot of applications in that sense too, of like helping them know how to like make their group work more effective. Yeah. I immediately texted the director of the grad program I did last year and said like, hey, this book is like really applicable, because ours was in the grad program is in innovation and leadership. And we talked a lot about groups and teams and like how to innovate within groups and teams. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is like so applicable, because it is, when you're trying to innovate, part of what you're having to figure out is like, how do you take the dynamics as they are and then do something different? And so I feel like she really gets at that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to do something a little different today. Like I said in the beginning, we really wanted to think back over, we started this in February of 2018. And in actuality, the idea for the podcast and the preliminary work for it really started in the summer of 2017. So we've been doing this a long time. So we just kind of wanted to look back and pick out some highlights from over the time that we have had together and share a few of those with you. Okay, so we'll share about our books first. And so again, this is not like our favorite book. We just tried to say like, what is a highlight of something that we've read that came up that we have discussed here on the podcast. So Jen, I'm going to ask you this time first. So what book came to mind for you?
Well, as is typical, I'm going to cheat a little bit. We did an episode.
Some things have never changed.
I know, right? Oh, yeah. I always want to talk about all the things. So back in 2019, episode 67, hello, teachers, you know why I'm pausing there. And anyone who works with young people, you know why I paused after 67. Anyway, so we actually did an episode about two books that we saw as being connected. So I am going to talk about both of them. We did Beth Macy's Dopesick, Dealers, Doctors, and the Drug Company That Addicted America, and Jarrett J. Krosoczka's Hey Kiddo, How I Lost My Mother, Found My Father, and Dealt with Family Addiction. So it was two nonfiction takes on a similar or at least connected topic. And I thought each of these books individually stood on its own, but also that the way they interacted in our brains and in our conversation was really powerful. So Macy's book was powerful for a multitude of reasons. That is the first I really truly understood the opioid epidemic and the way that it had developed, in many ways, had been developed quite deliberately as something that would addict people, because then that would make more money for pharmaceutical companies. And I think Macy does such a good job both at journalistically exploring that, but also looking at the impact on individual people and families. And one reason it really resonated is she was talking about places that geographically were close to home. And that I think it would resonate with any readers, but that was this extra layer of understanding when it's talking about high schools in neighboring school districts and teenagers who have died because of opioids. And yeah, it hit really hard. And then Krosoczka's memoir is a graphic memoir, and he is talking about the impact of opioids on his mother. And he does such a great job of expressing that from his personal point of view as the child of someone who was addicted and the way that affected his whole family. And he told that story just so beautifully that it was like a zoomed in version of what Macy's story did. So I thought, yeah, I couldn't separate those two, but both of those books definitely popped into my mind.
Appreciate you picking those because I thought they were both really impactful for me too. And I feel like I wouldn't have read them had it not been for the podcast. It just wouldn't have been on my radar. Mm-hmm. And we got to see both of the authors, meet one of them. So that was really cool too. So that's definitely one of my impactful readings that we did back then.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I feel like it was, Macy's book especially changed a core understanding that I had or thought I had about what addiction was and how it worked. And she shows, which is a raw truth, that it can happen to anyone, and that a lot of the people that it has happened to, like Jen said, it was part of a relatively systemic and insidious approach for a while there, that there is more regulation now, but because of what has happened. But we've lost a tremendous amount of lives because of it, and people continue to battle addiction because of it. So, yeah, I think that for me, a lot of what she discussed and then the people that she studied and the research that she did was just completely illuminating. And then, like you said, I appreciated the pairing because I think with Hey Kiddo, we really got a firsthand account of a kid experiencing that.
It really gave me perspective on incarceration as it pertains to drug use and, and all of that. So, yeah, it was definitely like a very light bulb moment reading that book.
The way that we were trying to help people in recovery programs and continue, this continues to be a struggle in our country and globally, that the way that we approach recovery and whether it's going to be effective or not, like the way that she explored all of that too. Again, I didn't realize how many assumptions I had about addiction until I read the book and was forced to sort of confront them and be like, oh, I have made a lot of assumptions about this that are just not true. They're just not grounded in fact.
It's also made me really question when I go to the doctor, and I had a back injury right after we read this book, and the first thing that was offered to me was narcotics to help with the pain management. And it after reading that book, I was like, absolutely not. And I know there are times when you need those things, but I was terrified because there was never a thought about how can we find out what's causing this. It was more like, how are we going to manage the pain? Yes. And so that was I really was grateful that I'd read that book because it made me really think about what I would accept for treatment, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because same, after I had surgery, it's that same kind of thing of here's all these medications you can take for pain management. And like you said, Sara, there are times that we need that, but you want to make an informed choice. And I think if I had not read Dopesick and some of the other things that I've read since about addiction, I just don't think I would have been as careful because I think we trust people to know what to recommend. And sometimes, even if it's well-meaning, I said before, things are more regulated now than they were for a while there.
For sure.
And so people are more cautious, but it's still just a very slippery slope. I think that was the thing that was so apparent is just how easily it can tip the wrong way.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and just the way the groundwork had been laid by so many changes. I also read later, if you haven't read Patrick Radden Keefe's Empire of Pain, that is a deep dive into the Sackler family and the way that they manipulated situations to make this happen. For me, my understanding started with Beth Macy's Dopesick. So yeah, it's an amazing work of journalism.
Sara, what about you? What book came up for you?
Okay, we're going to take a hard left from that because my pick is our episode 205, Anne of Green Gables. So definitely a different vibe than Jen's pick. But I think what I loved about this is that I think it's a classic. And I notably have said I hate all classics and I'm not reading them. And the podcast really did open me up to giving a few of them a chance. So we read Anne of Green Gables, and I had never really read it all the way through. I knew it just in pop culture, its relevance and all that, but I had never read it all the way through. And we read it for book club for episode 205. And I listened to the version that Rachel McAdams reads. And I loved this book. It just totally changed my perspective on it. I just couldn't believe I hadn't read it earlier. And I just loved our conversation on it. And I just loved how we all just were gushing about this book. And so it was just a core experience for me, just being okay, so some classics deserve my time. And then I think later we read Pride and Prejudice, which I also listened to, and I really enjoyed that. So it was just kind of a turning point moment for me as a reader, because I just loved it so much. And I had it on my shelf since I was a child and had never read it. So it was a great experience. And I just loved Anne and loved her story. And the Audible version was fantastic. So I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful book. That was one of my childhood favorites. I was obsessed with Ellen Montgomery. And so, yeah, to be able to revisit it with the two of you was so wonderful. And to know that you all loved it as much as I did. Yeah.
It's so funny. On my Google Photos, it popped up when we did the Halloween virtual happy hour, and you were dressed up with your Anne braids.
That was a look for sure.
I love that. And same, Sarah, that I also had not read it in its entirety, definitely. And I loved it so much, experiencing that with you all. And I for sure would not have picked it up, because I think I also had this stereotypical attitude toward Anne. And it was a complete misunderstanding of who she was as a character. And I think also it's looking now and reading it and thinking the way that authors do shape and change how we perceive people, how we perceive kids, in this case, how we perceive a young girl and her spunkiness and her attitude, and how, I think Montgomery is putting in a new light at the time that she was writing, this new light toward this lovely young girl who, in other circumstances might have been portrayed in a very different way. And then again, in a way that I think I had misunderstood her as a character entirely. And then when I read it, I just love her. I think you come to love her. She's very much portrayed as a whole person who really is doing her best in the world, and whose unique circumstances lead toward really meaningful things in her community.
That's so beautiful. Yes.
Yes. I kind of want to reread it. I know.
We were talking about it. I was I should read it with the girls. I think they would really love it.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
So sweet.
And I will say the old movies that were from the 80s are really good too. I haven't watched the new adaptation because I've heard mixed reviews, and I don't want to color my memories of the book and the original series, but it's really good. All right, Ashley, what's your book that pops up for you?
Oh, gosh. Well, first, I thought one of you might talk about Bryan Stevenson's Just Mercy.
It was on my list.
Neither of you did. I just want to say that's not the one I'm going to talk about, but I know, because we have circled back to that many times. That was one of the very first books that we read very early on in our journey. And I think it is one that I, like you said, Sarah, I don't know that I would have read it if it hadn't been for the podcast. But when people ask, what is a book that everyone should read, that is almost always the first one I recommend. I just think the way that Stevenson shows the intricacies of our justice system in our country expose some really important things about the flaws in a way that is grounded in truth, grounded in research, grounded in real lives. And so, yes, that one comes to mind. So I guess I'm cheating, Jen.
That's okay.
I said I wasn't going to talk about that one. I just know that the three of us have revisited the impact of that book many times. So that comes up for me. The one that I had on the list here is Tommy Orange's There. And I think the reason that came up for me is that, well, first, so Orange just won the MacArthur Genius Grant. And if you haven't read his work, I just can't recommend it enough. But I think the reason it came up for me is just that the book was brilliant. I had a phenomenal reading experience with it. But I think also it was that the discussion that I had with you all was so meaningful and profound and exploratory, and I understood it in such a more complex way after talking with you all. And I think that's why I wanted to share that one, is because and this has been true of so many of our discussions, is like, I think when we become adults, we don't always get to celebrate in real life, like having really important conversations about things. And something I really value about the podcast and about reading with both of you is just that, like, I've gotten to continue to do a thing that I love to do, but might have left behind if it hadn't been for this opportunity. So,
yes, I love that book so much. I actually it's included in my lit circles at school, and students always had the best experience reading it because I think it is such a rich text, and it's just so understanding of the modern condition as applied to a very particular community, but also it really understands like modern America, and yeah, students just really gravitate towards it.
Same. I reiterate everything you all said about that. I adored it. It was such great writing. And I just remember reading that book and just feeling gut punched. So, yes. It's like visceral. Yeah, I adored that. And also to what you said about Just Mercy. To me, that book is just like Dopesick. It's one of those books that has stuck with me since I read it. And so I'd carry it with me and think about it a lot. So, but both great picks, and it's okay you cheated.
Yes.
Thank you. We also wanted to share a highlight of our time together. So we're just going to look back over the years and think about something that we enjoyed that came from doing the podcast together. So Sara, you want to start us off for that one?
I would be happy to. So mine is, so I guess when I'm thinking about times in the podcast, a lot of times we have similar beliefs and things that we enjoy. So we often agree on what we're talking about. So I'm going to circle back to a time when Jen and I had a face-off in episode 104, and the topic was, what makes a holiday movie? And specifically, we faced off against each other about Love Actually, and we had a heated debate, which Ashley was the reluctant referee of. And I just love that because when I think about it, we had a respectful debate, and I don't think that we changed each other's mind at all, but I enjoyed being able to discuss it. And again, like do something different on the podcast. Cause again, we a lot of times agree on most things. So we did both have our pretty set opinions on that. So it was just really fun. And if you know from when I was regularly on the podcast, I love anything to do with the holidays. So that was also incorporated as one of my highlights because it was a holiday themed episode. And then we had our little lively debate. So that's my pick. And it's near and dear to my heart, that episode.
I know that was so much fun because, yeah, we both have a passion for pop culture. And so to be able to work through a common debate in pop culture circles. Yeah, it may not be out there as much as is Die Hard, a holiday movie, but I think for us, perhaps it's more impactful. Yeah.
Yes, that was a surprisingly heated situation. I was like, oh, and also I don't have any stake in this. So how interesting to be caught in a sudden crossfire of what is normally a very peaceful podcast. But yes, it was definitely a fun and spirited debate. What about you, Jen? What highlight comes up for you?
So I love book events, and we were able to go to the Virginia Festival of the Book together twice. Once we saw Beth Macy and Jarrett J. Krosoczka, not together. Macy was in conversation with another author, Chris McGreal, about a related book. His is American Overdose, the Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts. And Krosoczka was speaking alone. And then we also saw Jason Reynolds and Laurie Halse Anderson together. And I love Macy and Krosoczka, I will say, individually. But the Reynolds and Anderson conversation was inspiring and emotional and challenging in all the best ways. And I think just seeing these two brilliant authors have an in-depth conversation about how people should write for teenagers was incredible, both as someone who has teenagers and someone who is a teacher and works with teenagers every day. I appreciated their honesty and their vulnerability and the way they are like that in real life and in their books. And so, yeah, I think anytime you can go to a book event, I love the National Book Festival every year, but being able to go with Ashley and Sara was amazing just because we got to experience that together and fangirl and learn and process. And yeah, so the Virginia Festival of the Book those 2 times. Those were great experiences.
And we got to meet Jason
Oh my
Reynolds
gosh.
too and have him sign our books. I love him as a person and an author. And I do first chapter Friday in my classroom. And I chose Ghost, which is one of his series to read. And so many students loved it, loved the first chapter. I ordered like 6 copies for my classroom. So he just has a way of speaking to young people that is unparalleled. And then likewise with Lori Halls Anderson, I just finished her new historical fiction, Rebellion 1776. And the way that she writes in such an accessible way for young people about things that are old, like from hundreds of years ago, she's just incredible. So yeah, that is one of the highlights of my life as a reader. And then being there with you both, it made it that much better. So yeah, I love that. That was definitely a highlight for me also.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I very rarely feel starstruck by meeting people. We were like standing in line to meet him, and I was like, ladies, I might pass out. I mean, I just was like, it's what you said, Sarah. Like, I admire both of them so much. And it is just rare for me in any industry to really just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing this person in real life. But I think I had that moment because both of them have so profoundly affected the reading world and the world at large. I mean, they both do a lot of social activism. Like, they talk about really important social issues. They are writing to and for and about people who are often not represented in stories. And so I just think like, yeah, that was really a phenomenal moment.
I have goosebumps thinking about
I know. It was so great. It was so great. Did you see that there's a new book in the Ghost series that just came out?
Oh, no.
I did not.
Yeah, so I got it from the library. I haven't read it yet, but yeah, I have it on my little stack. So it's Coach is the new one.
Oh, that's
wow.
awesome.
Yeah.
That will be cool.
All right, Ashley, what is your highlight?
Well, I am going to mention another one that I know that you all both enjoyed as well. But in 2020, we went to Podfest in Orlando, and
March 4th. So just put that in perspective.
Yes, so it was so impactful to my life in so many ways. And it was March 4th. So immediately after that, we had, literally the next week, we all started, staying at home for the pandemic. And I think that part of why I have revisited that moment so many times in my mind is just that on the COVID front, I had this very special, very precious time with you all. We went to Universal Studios. We did a lot of fun things. We had this crazy trip down there. We got to a hotel that had no water at like 12:30 in the morning. And then we were supposed to be doing the amusement park stuff. We could only fit it in if we went at like 6 the next morning before the conference. And so, we didn't get to our hotel till like 3 in the morning. We needed to get out the very early next morning. And so all those things were just very crazy. And yet we had this really great, very special time at Universal Studios and had fun. And then we did this conference. And listeners know, this is my job now. I'm a podcast producer. I'm a strategist. I'm in that industry. And I think that in a lot of ways, though I did not know it or see it at the time, that moment of going and being, I remember all of us were just like, there are other people who do this thing, just us feeling like suddenly we saw this community of people who we had never experienced before. And we saw a lot of people speaking really passionately about something that we had been doing for a couple of years at that point, but very much in like a for fun way. And this podcast is still very much for fun, but I think it transformed my view of what podcasting could be by being in a space with thousands of other people who were doing this thing and loving this thing that like otherwise had kind of just been the three of us doing. And so I feel like when I think back about transformative moments, like for me, that really was something that profoundly changed my life. So yeah.
That's a great pick. What I think too is like, it's like the before and after, of COVID. And being there, you had to wear a sticker if you were open to hugs. Do you remember this? And it was just like hand sanitizer everywhere. But then we go to Universal Studios and it was like deserted. So we got to ride every single thing. But then in the back of our minds are like, should we be here? Why is there nobody else here, But it was just such an amazing trip. Again, being there with you guys and getting to have that experience of like being amongst podcasters who were so passionate about what they did. It was awesome. Yeah. I love that too.
I know.
Anytime I travel with you two, it was a highlight for
Yes.
sure.
I think that too, that, like part of what, when I was thinking back about this, I was like, we need to go on another trip. I mean, I think in my adult life, especially after having kids, but even before, I really haven't been great about making time to go on trips with my friends. And I think that's part of why it was so special to me. Is like, it was so much fun to be out of my family life, out of my work life, and just with my friends having a really great time and being in that moment. And for sure with the pandemic after, it was like I said, I just was a mental space that I could go to and like hold on to amid what was some really hard times, you know, after that for all of us. And so, and we've laughed many times after where you all were like, she would be wearing masks. And I was like, oh, I mean, I am someone who was the first in line to get a vaccine. Okay. But I just was like, oh, things have been blown out of proportion. And I was completely wrong. I mean, I just think, you know, I remember you all being worried and me being like, we travel all the time. It's totally fine. And then like, you know, 5 days later, we were like, oh, everything's closed. We are wearing masks and we definitely should not have gone, but we didn't know that.
Right.
So
I remember being in the airport on the way home and Ashley's like, don't watch the TV. Don't watch the TV because everything is like COVID. And I'm like in a full-fledged panic. And she's like,
I really
don't watch
was
it.
like, don't watch because I was like, we got to go home.
Yeah.
Like
We gotta get
we
home.
can't hear her. But it was for sure. There was that moment where it was that tipping point of me being dismissive to all of a sudden being like, ladies, I think I made a mistake. And also we still have to go home. So
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. And also terrifying.
I was going to say the weirdness of that nostalgia trip. It's so, yeah, because it was just that last gasp of freedom before we locked down and were, you know, I was wiping everything with Clorox wipes when we brought it home from the grocery store and just the quickness of that turn. Because I'd been reading about things happening elsewhere but yeah, just when it hit very quickly.
and again, should have been much earlier and we just didn't realize. So, I mean, I think it was just you know, there were signs, but you really had to be paying more attention. Obviously, I was for what signs were. And then all of a sudden, yeah, for us, I mean, and every place was different. But in Virginia, you know, once we stayed home, it was, oh, it's going to be till spring break. And then it was like, oh, no, it's going to be, you know, we're going to add a couple of weeks on to spring break. And then all of a sudden, like for a lot of us, we did not leave for, well, you know, for a long time. We stayed home. Like my kids were out the whole next school year, you know. So anyway, I feel like we could not have known what was coming. But like I said, it was kind of like a fantasy. You know, I would just revisit this like very special time with you two and be like, okay, we have some fun moments. So, well, we are going to end today with the Lit Chat game. Sara, I don't know if you know we're doing that, but surprise.
I saw the Lit Chat game on the rundown, but I was like, I don't know what it's going to be, but
When we wrapped up with 2022 season, we were still doing Give Me One, which was a lot of fun, but we were finding that we were running out of Give Me One topics. And so some months we'd be like, what are we going to talk about this time? I don't know. We've already talked about blank, 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 and blank. Like, and so anyway, these days, Sara, we do the Lit Chat game, 1 episode a month, and then we do our unabridged favorite the other time. And so we have found that the topics, usually we have something to say between the two of those. So anyway.
All right. So today's topic is there a particular book or series you associate most with your childhood?
Okay. All right. Sara, what do you think?
oh my gosh, I was a series queen. And I still like a series, but I've learned in my later life that I only like a trilogy. And after a trilogy, I'm out. Which goes with the long books. It's just, I needed to be wrapped up. But when I was a kid, I loved Sweet Valley Twins and then later Sweet Valley High. And then I also loved, there was one called The Fabulous Five, which was a group of 5 girls. And I love that. So, if there was a series, I was in. And I would go to B. Dalton booksellers. I would get paper gift certificates for Christmas. And I would go and sit on the floor in front of the series and just get stacks that I could go right into the next one. And so series were one of the things that made me an avid reader because I had to know what was going to be next. So if it was a series for YA or middle grade, I was there. So yeah, series had a huge impact on me as a reader.
I love that. And I'm with you about the trilogy now these days. Duology is even better.
Yes.
Yeah, even better. Yes.
But yes. What about you, Jen?
Yeah, mine's also a series. I did also read Sweet Valley Twins and Sweet Valley High, but I loved a mystery series when I was a kid. So I read the classic Nancy Drews, but then they kept trying to bring them back and they would remake them for the modern setting. And so there were at least 2 other iterations of Nancy Drew series that I read. Bobbsey Twins, Hardy Boys, Trixie Belden. I read all of them. So we would go to the library and I would just check out stacks and stacks of books. And if there were any mystery series in our Scholastic little book flyers when I was in elementary school, actually clear through high school, because we did not have a bookstore in my hometown. We had to drive a very long way for a bookstore and you couldn't order books online. So Scholastic saved me. So yeah, I would just buy, just the stacks of those mystery series. So I really loved them.
I love Nancy Drew too. I wouldn't read the older ones, but the ones with the new like flashy covers, I really like those too. Yeah, I like the mystery also.
All right. How about you, Ashley?
Yeah, I thought Nancy Drew. I read a lot of those. There was a gymnastics series that I loved that I was like trying to look very quickly to see if I could find what it was called because I don't remember anything about it. When I was in elementary school, I was reading those. So I don't remember the name of the series, but it was one that had just tons and tons of books. And I read a lot of those. And then also, like, my dad had read Watership Down with us when I was a kid. And as an adult now, I'm like, really? That was the thing? But, like, I just remember that. And I don't even remember the book particularly, but I do remember him reading it. And so that one came to mind. And I think, like, that tone of book, was appealing to me for a long time. So anyway, those are some things that came to mind. I will say, like, for all the reading I do now, I actually feel like, and I mean, I wound up, like, I was an English major. I mean, I very much, like, leaned into the literary stuff. But honestly, it has not been until my adult life and meeting you all and, kind of learning more about how to read more for fun and wider that I feel like my reading life as an adult is a much more robust life than it was when I was a kid, I would say.
Yeah, I think, too, for me, being a part of the podcast really pushed me to read things that I normally wouldn't pick up. So, like, when I look back on my time being on the podcast, I am always so grateful because it has made me, number one, open myself up to a lot more diverse authors and like just reading nonfiction, because I used to never read nonfiction. So like reading nonfiction and just the breadth of what I read has been impacted so much by my time on the podcast. So I really appreciate that. And my time being on, I still miss it sometimes.
No, y'all are going to make me cry. Yeah. Because it's so special. It's been so special. And just the friendship, we were already friends, but it definitely deepened our friendship so much. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, like I was saying earlier about just like discussing things in a meaningful way, and how I think what I really appreciate is like when you do a project like this, you make space as an adult to do a thing that you otherwise just don't get to do. Mm-hmm. And I think like that part is like really powerful and something that I appreciate, because I think like, we try to have hobbies and stuff like that, but life is busy and it is hard to like fit those things in. But I think stuff like this, where you do have that structure in place, makes it more where you get to do the thing that you otherwise wouldn't do, that both is fun, but also like stretches you and like, encourages you to kind of keep showing up, keep doing the thing. But for sure, like I had never read romance books until the podcast, which I mean, thank goodness during COVID, let me tell you, it is very fortunate that I had discovered that I liked romance books, because I was really looking for things that were fun and felt safe, and that I thought that things would work out. Like I needed things to work out. And so, I think about that, like thrillers and true crime. Like, again, those still aren't my favorite, but I think there are ones I have gotten to read. Horror, that I've gotten to read books that are brilliant that I wouldn't have read if it hadn't been for us saying like, hey, we're going to discuss this thing, or like, let's give this one a try. And yeah, like you said, Sarah, I mean, it's just totally changed the way that I read, which is really cool. Happy 300th, lady.
Thanks for having me back. I have loved every second of it.
Yay. Thanks for coming back.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And those of you who have been tuning in all this time, we appreciate you and we love reading with you and hearing what you think about the books, and that you hang out in the Unabridged community space with us. So thanks so much for listening.
Thank you. Do you have comments or opinions about what you heard today? We'd love to hear them. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Unabridged Pod, or on the web at unabridgedpod.com for ways to support us. To get more involved, you can sign up for our newsletter, join a buddy read, or become an ambassador. Thanks for listening to Unabridged.